Today I'm going to show you how to do a poor man's rubber roof for a sun parlor extension to a Dutch colonial. I'm sure many of you have porches that are very similar to this on old houses. This house was built about 1920. You can see that around the perimeter of the porch is a railing, and that of course makes roofing a much more difficult job than if there weren't any railing, but you like to keep the railing in place because it makes the house look better. Now, let me just say that the job has actually started now. Let me just explain to you what the problems with the professional job were. First, it was going to be between $2,000 and $3,500, and nobody knew quite what it would be. One of the big difficulties is when the professionals do a rubber roof, they insist on running the rubber roof up behind clapboards. Well, you can see these are very old clapboards, not easily obtainable, very expensive, and probably easy to crack. And I just simply decided that I didn't want that to happen. There's a good reason for doing it that way, but you can get away without it. Also, that theory is kind of put out of commission by the fact that there is a threshold here, and they wouldn't be able to run the roof up along the clapboards in that location. The other problem, of course, is the railing. And as you can see, I've kind of gotten started here. I've already made myself a template. There's some material that you can buy at the Home Depot that is made for construction purposes when you have to walk on a surface and you don't want to mar it. It's a very thin cardboard-like material, which makes an excellent material for a template. And as you can see, I'm just about ready to remove the template. You can see that I've got the form of the posts very carefully outlined with duct tape, and just about ready to move this out so we can set it on top of the EBTM membrane and mark it. We are going to use what is called EBTM rubber roof membrane, which is available at Home Depot for about $200 for a roll, 10 by 25, which will pretty much exactly handle this deck, which is just about 10 by 20, plus a foot or two. One other problem that makes the job expensive, other than the posts and the need to run it up behind the clapboards, is the fact that there is an issue with the underlayment. I chose not to use half-inch fiberboard underlayment for this job simply because I really didn't think it needed it. You are not supposed to let EBTM membrane come in contact with any kind of asphalt material which is actively leaching solvents. That's called the bitumen type of roofing. And this is, of course, old mineral, asphalt mineral roofing. So anything with asphalt is generally not felt to be a good thing to butt up against EBTM. However, in this particular case, you can see that there have been numerous roof coatings with the RTV silver here, and I doubt there's very little to be leaching out of this at the moment. The one area that there might be some is where I've patched it. As you can see, these corner patches are where there was some degree of ponding, and the ponding has basically required that I come out and do this on a regular basis to prevent leaks. But this would be more active than the rest of the roof. So I'm not worried so much about the rest of the roof. I think we can lay the EBTM right over it. So the next step is cutting the rubber roof. This roof is going to have to be seamed. I'll show you how that's done a little bit later on. But the next step will involve actually setting the template down and marking the EBTM roofing ready to install. One other comment. I don't intend to fully adhere this roof. I intend to use a ballast principle, which will make it a lot easier to do for one person. These little patio stones have rounded corners on them. I'm going to put a bunch of these down, as you'll see at the end, to hold the roof in place. One big problem right now is how to seal around the posts. Obviously, I'm going to have to seal these well with a type of caulk that will adhere both to the asphalt and to the EBTM. Not sure exactly what that's going to be right now. So the next step is cutting of the rubber. By the way, these are more correctly referred to as pavers. And if you want more specifics on the board that I use for template, it's called ram board, normally used as a floor protector. beginning with the templating process, you notice I've taken a very inexpensive top that I got from the Harbor Freight for, I think I paid $17, something like that. I'm putting this down on the floor of the garage only to keep the rubber clean. You like a surface that's as smooth as possible when you do your templating, so that's why I've done this. It takes a couple of minutes to get it nice and flat, and then you set the rubber on top of it, and that'll be next. There you see the final marking. I used one of those whiteout pens that I got at the CVS in order to mark onto the black. There you can see the small posts and the large posts at the end. One little thing I'm a little concerned about was the possibility of cumulative error as a result of the wrinkles. This is a fairly long distance. So what I did was I backed that side of each mark in just a little bit. And I made it a little progressively wider as I went along. That was, I think, about 5/8, and this was close to 3/4 down here. Looks like we're now all ready to move the rubber roof, the membrane, back up onto the porch. This is called rolling the rolled roofing. And then I got to get it up the stairs. This is where it could get a little dicey for one person. Got to get this up the stairs. Okay, here we are. The roofing is in place. Takes a little time to unfold it. As you can see, if you look carefully at the corners, down by the posts, you can see that it does fit pretty well. At least there's no major gaps, and that's the way you want it. One other quick comment before we move on to the excuse me. Before we move on to the issue of the asphalt, is you'll notice that there's a slit here. That's how I got the rubber around the post. Just pulled it back and slipped it around the post, and those are going to have to be worked on later. That's another part of the project which we'll talk about then. Okay, here's the next issue that we have to deal with. You'll notice that the corners and the leading edge of this roof have been heavily slathered with asphalt-based roofing cement to stop leaks. There's a ponding condition there. This has been done over the years many times, and that asphalt is still rather fresh. Here's the problem, that the roofing membrane doesn't like asphalt. So we have to find something to at least slide in under the roofing membrane to basically isolate it from the bitumen, which is certainly going to be producing fumes in this area. The silver stuff is probably well cured. That hasn't been done in probably 20 years, and so I wouldn't worry too much about that. But we have to find something to cover up the asphalt. Normally, if this job was done professionally, they probably would use something called insulation board, and they would screw it down, and that would be a good way to do it. However, I've chosen to do it slightly differently here and in a somewhat easier way, not that it's necessarily any cheaper. I think what we're going to use here is a product called Grace Triflex, which is a synthetic, non-bitumen-based water shield. And what we will do is, which according to the company is compatible with both the rubber roofing membrane, the EBTM, and with asphalt. And so what we'll do is we'll sandwich that between the deck and the roofing membrane. And so that's the next thing we have to do. This is fairly expensive. It runs about $110 a roll at the depot, and you end up with a lot more in this particular job than you need. But the only other way to do this would be that I could think of would be with flashing, and that's much harder and about the same price. Okay, here we are, ready to do another template, this time using the Triflex, which is a membrane that's compatible with both asphalt and EPTM roofing, and serves as a vapor barrier to keep the fumes from disintegrating the rubber. And as you can see now, the holes are all cut, and we hope they will line up perfectly. The Grace Triflex is now in position. As you can see, If you look down at the corners, you can see that the corners came out very well. Everything fits beautifully around the posts. And now the next thing is we're going to seal those seams. Since they're not the important seams, we're going to seal them with an old standby called duct tape. And we'll do that next. As you can see, the duct tape is now in place. Now the plan is to go up one more course with the Triflex. I could go all the way up to the top. I'm not sure I'm going to bother with it because there shouldn't be any leaching of the asphalt since this is extremely old roof coating. Everything is down in position, and you know, I might actually go to a third tier since I've got it. I might as well. Before I do put the third tier of the Triflex down, I think I am going to roll the rubber into place. This is important because it's positioned now. I don't want to pick it up completely. It's sort of in position. It'll make it easier to roll it. One other thing, I am going to caulk around the Triflex with the first layer of caulk, which is a Gentite product. It's called Edge Seal or Edge Caulk, and I think that's going to be a good first measure. I did decide to do the third tier of the Triflex, just laying it down. It went very quickly. Had to cut around the posts, of course. Templates are always the biggest problem, and you know, I'm not going to even bother to duct tape it. I really don't think it needs it. Because the roll wasn't quite wide enough, we had to do a splice up at the top, and for this we used what was remaining on the roll. It was a 25-foot roll, and the deck was about 20 feet long, so there was some extra there, thankfully, so I wouldn't have to buy another roll. And as you can see, I have done a splice. That consists of the Gentite splicing tape. I'll tell you exactly what it's called in just a minute. And it's quite easy to lay down, and there's a removable backing. It's kind of a peel and stick type of thing. So actually it went along pretty well. You're supposed to let a little of the adhesive stick out. You're supposed to prime it too, by the way. I didn't bother with the primer because, once again, this isn't a completely flat roof and all the water is going to be running away from the splice. So I just stuck the two together. I'll get the name of that for you. There you go. It's called Gentite Peel and Stick Seam Tape, black. About 61 bucks a box, I believe. I'll check it later. Okay, there's the peel and stick in place. And what we'll do is, you can see, we're going to lay that membrane that has the patio pavers on it over the peel and stick surface. That's the peel part. And then we're going to peel it away, and everything should seal nicely. As far as you know, applying pressure to the peel and stick, you're supposed to have a special roller, but screw that. This is a poor man's deck, not a rich man's deck. Here's a nasty little place that's going to require a lot of patching with small pieces, just because I want to use up every little last piece of the roll. And when this is done, supposedly all the peel and stick will be over, except for the seams along the edge of the roof. Okay, the seaming up against the wall is all done now. We're going to put a weather stripping, by the way, up against the house to just make absolutely certain that nothing leaks underneath. Obviously, you can caulk it as well, but we're going to do probably both. And over here, you see the little place where I had to do a little patchwork. That's all done. And then tomorrow we're going to do the seams on the leading edge of the roof, which shouldn't be too hard. They require a little bit of ingenuity, because we won't go by the book exactly. And after that, we'll just worry about the seaming, the caulking around the posts. That's the big deal. Today we're going to put down the edging stock up against the clapboards. Now you may recall that the professionals want to run this rubber up at least a foot behind the clapboards. They'd take all the clapboards off, including the railing, and they said, oh, you absolutely had to do that for reasons which I completely didn't understand. So since everything drains away from the side of the house, I'm just going to make sure that everything is caulked very well, and there's going to be a strip put down. This is a piece of vinyl molding that I chose. I originally was going to do aluminum, but that wasn't consistent with a poor man's roof, so I chose the vinyl. I'm going to use stainless steel deck screws every foot, and I'm going to do 2 lines of caulk. The first one before I put the strip into place, and the second afterwards, to make sure there's absolutely no chance that the water can get in underneath it. So that's what we're going to do next. There we are, about half done, a little more than half done with the weather stripping that we're putting on here. The vinyl molding, as it were. Notice I have the pointy edge sticking up under the clapboards. Now, when this is done, we'll move on to the next step. We're getting ready to put the drip edge on. I just want to show you that with a loose laid roof, and I would assume that would be with a fully ballasted roof as well, there's always going to be problems with wrinkles. And particularly when the sun gets at an angle, you might want to shoot yourself. But in fact, wrinkles don't really do very much to hurt the impact of the roof. In other words, the roof will perform perfectly well with wrinkles. I spent about an hour kind of messing around with the wrinkles and redoing the templates a little bit. Unfortunately, the templates now are kind of sloppy, at least on the other side that you can't see, but we can fix that. You got to remember now that this is full sun, and the rubber roof is expanded about as much as it's going to expand. It's red hot. It's almost impossible to kneel on at this point or touch. So when it cools, these wrinkles will probably all go away, but that'll be in the middle of the night when you really don't care. So in any event, if you're looking for a perfect job, I don't hope there's nobody going to whine about this. This is a poor man's rubber roof, not a rich man's rubber roof, and you should be able to tolerate a few wrinkles. Now, I'm over here and I'm looking at the edge. I'm now trimming along the edge, getting ready to position the drip edge. That'll be next. Okay, as you can see, the drip edge is in place. It's getting kind of late. I'm getting ready to finish up here. I've mounted it on top of the rubber as opposed to underneath. Really not the best way to do it, but it kind of holds it in place. So I thought it was a good idea. It is very thin, so most of the water is going to pass over it. And now the last thing of the evening is I am in the process of caulking the posts with Gen-Tite edge caulk, which is what they recommend. I was thinking of doing it with the silicone, which I've used in a bunch of other places here, but I decided to go with the manufacturer's recommendation. So I'm putting on a good heavy bead. Everything is pretty much done now. You can see that the roof has just been subjected to its first rain. This is full sun. You can look along and see the wrinkles that are going to be there as the roof warms up and expands. Looking around, I notice there's a few places where there's ponding water. This certainly is to be expected. I don't see anything critical. That's probably one of the worst ones, but that's going to be gone in just a few hours. So a few final comments about this. Again, one of the big issues is whether or not the seams or the caulking around the posts is going to work in the long run. This is a very flexible caulk. It can expand and contract as the membrane expands and contracts. It never fully hardens. And I think it will probably do the job quite well. The one thing is that it will have to be watched. You are going to have to examine it on a regular basis to make sure that there are no breaches. I will say one thing about the template method. In retrospect, you might end up by getting a perfect fit at the beginning, but as a result of this expansion and contraction, there is bound to be some adjustment necessary, as there was in this case. I had to do quite a lot of adjustment and actually do a little patchwork to make everything come out. Okay, a few last-minute items. Keep an eye on the quality of the caulk. One other thing is you might want to relax the membrane for at least a day first before you put it down. Then you won't have to make so many adjustments to the holes around the posts as I did. So the template worked fine, but it needed some adjustment. Letting the membrane relax may also cut down on the number of wrinkles, but there always will be some as the material expands and contracts. Apply your sealant when everything is cold, and then when the material expands, it will squash up against the post. That way you will have less chance of leaks around your caulking. Some ponding is always to be expected. As you can see, we've just had the remnants of a fairly heavy rain. No problem. I was very lucky because I got away using just one roll of the roofing, the rubber roofing, 10 by 25, because the area here was about 11 by 22. I did have to do a little patching at the end, but I made out so I didn't have to go to a second roll, and that is all that I have left. The primary costs of the project were, the big ticket items were the Grace Triflex, $110, the Gentite, membrane, which is $198. These are all Home Depot prices. And the Gentite 3" by 50 peel and sticks seam tape for $52. And a bunch of other things, a few pieces of drip edge and some PVC molding, and a couple of tubes of the edge caulk and a couple of tubes of the GE silicone, and that all brought everything up to just under $500. This is already to be ballasted now if you want, but you know what? I'm going to try it without the ballasting. Change my mind on it. I think everything should be fine, barring some sort of 300-mile-an-hour wind that would lift this up. But if you like, you can put something like the blocks that I picked up at the Home Depot down. I'd space them maybe at 1 square yard intervals. But for now, we're going to leave everything alone. Okay, that concludes the video on how to do a poor man's rubber roof. And hope when you try it, you have as good a luck as I did. Just a very quick post-mortem. This is what the roof looks like when it's nice and cool. You notice there's very few wrinkles. Looks really nice. I just wanted to show you. And when the sun comes out, of course, it'll all change. But if you want to make yourself happy, always look at it when it's cold.